what's characteristic of convergence soaring like that is that it kicks up a lot of bubbly thermals. And so on a sort of mediocre day, you'll be flying along and you'll keep hitting these little bubbles that you can't really circle in. And then every once in a while, you'll hit a real good core you can make use of. And so the tactic is to just bump along in those bubbles, you know, just use that to conserve altitude as much as you can while you're making progress. And wait for a good solid one. And what do I mean by a good solid one? Well, you know, you'll be flying along and you'll hit this boom, and you go, I better turn. And so, you know, you're a half second into it and you turn. You have not explored enough to find whether that's worth turning. And a lot of times, you know, you turn and nothing happens. You lost the bubble. I count to 3 really as a test of, is this thing good enough that I'm going to turn and it's going to have enough radius to be useful. And surprisingly, again, you know, I'll hit those bubbles until I get to elevator 2, or somewhere near that. Other things to think about when you're convergence soaring is there's visual cues. Even without cumulus clouds to mark them, there are days when you're flying along you're sort of feeling out the convergence line. And by the way, if you get off the convergence line, all that air that came up with the convergence goes out like this and goes down. And so you can get a mile off the convergence line and it's just down, down, down as you go parallel to it. And you've got to find your way back to it. Is that you can be flying along and it's distinctly different visibility in the 2 air masses. One of them might be much murkier than the other. And that's sort of a hint that that's convergence. Another thing is, if it's a blue day, there's an inversion layer up there at 8 or 10,000 feet or something like that, and you ride the thermal, one of these blue thermals, all the way to the top. And you look around, and you're right at the top of the inversion, and you can see domes in the haze layer. You know, because it's clear above this, and the haze is trapped below. You can actually see domes ahead of you on course that are marking where the next strong thermals are pushing up the inversion layer. You'll see just little wispy little clouds forming, and then dissipating, and there's not enough moisture to make a full cumulus cloud. That's indicating the top of the horse. So look for those. And then if it is a good day with cumulus clouds, what you may find is cumulus clouds right on the convergence line with 2 different cloud bases. And they can be like 1,000 feet difference or more. And the way to fly that is to fly under the higher step of the cloud base.
With your power farm on.
With your power farm on, because people are doing the same thing coming the other way at 90 knots. So, yeah, concerned about that. But those are the powerful days when you're just holding the stick forward, trying not to get sucked into the cloud.
So then you can talk about Florida. Are there sort of reporting points so that the flying is Sierras or?
Well, if you know, we prefer. Hopefully, people, if you can install farm in your glider, we don't have that. For the reporting points, they're the exact points I've given you here. These are the same. These are the landmarks that people can use to say where they are.
I thought we were making farm mandatory for that.
Well, I don't know that we can, but.
Rami had thrown that out, but I don't think that
Nobody else is bought on.
Well, I think that most of the gliders already have it.
Yeah.
So I think making it mandatory is not really necessary.
I mean,
But there is nothing like a procedure, what is it called?
Procedure alpha.
Or something on the whites. We don't do that.
I mean, we're all on the same radio frequency. We're on 123.3.
A lot of chatter.
Sometimes, some days there's too much chatter.
Every day there's too much chatter.
Every day there's too much chatter. So yeah, I'll ask people, you know, I'll bring that up here, is position reports, things like this. And we're going to be doing this mentor pair flying. And Marianne remembers the day when she was flying with Buzz where I was just getting so sick of between the
I don't remember that.
You won't remember that.
I was having a great time.
You were having too much fun. But, you know, you can get these pairs and people are trying to fly within sight of their mentor, which may not be really necessary. But, you know, when people call you to ask, you hear your call sign, especially from your mentor pilots, you're flying a pair. You don't need to ask them what they want. What they want is, where are you, what's your altitude? And maybe, are you climbing, are you proceeding? It's all you need, and that's the report for everybody. It's 2 northwest of elevator 4, 8,000 feet, gliding towards elevator 4. And that's how you give the position reports. is just keep it concise. You don't need to tell people how you're feeling, how good your sandwich was, things like this. I've also heard some of the most useless position reports ever. I think a lot of them, I'm going to claim they came from people flying rental gliders on the But the ones where they say, "Where are you? I'm under this cloud here.
No, over this tree.
I'm over these brown mountains with little green trees." I've actually heard that. And then my favorite is when you're trying to, you know somebody's in your area and they've got you, they've spotted you and you're trying to get a position report as to where you should look. And they say, "It's okay, you're at my 12 o'clock. Which he's confirmed that he sees me and he's pointed straight at me, but I have no idea when he's in front of me. I don't need to know where I am at your 12 o'clock. I need to know whether you're at my 12 o'clock, or my 6 o'clock, or my 4 o'clock, whatever. Those are the useful position reports. So, I mean, the other thing to think about when you hear position reports, and is this a conflict? Altitude separation is much more precise than geographic separation. That's why the air traffic control system uses it. And therefore, if you hear somebody says, "I'm 4 miles northwest of EL4 at 8,000 feet, and you're 4 miles southeast of EL4 at 8,000 feet, be concerned." Whereas if that person is 3,000 feet different from you, you know, maybe he's climbing in a thermal and you've got to think about that. But it's, you know, when a lot of times you will pass people without ever seeing them, but you were able to say, "I'm at 10.5 and he's down there at 8.5, so we're going to be safe going the opposite direction."
So any altitude pressure or an adjustment on the altimeter, or you just?
We usually just start with the Hollister altimeter setting and leave it there. When we're flying this one, we typically don't change any other setting.
That way everybody's on the same.
Yeah, everything's on the same
Except the
level.
power plane.
Yeah, well, we don't care about that.
Yeah. Now, there are some airways, I should mention, when you mentioned power planes. There's this VOR at Pinoche, and there's the VOR at Priest Valley, and there are airways that go in between. And so you may see power planes on these routes.
Do people actually use those anymore?
Use airways
VORs, yeah.
and VORs. Yeah, there's a fair number of people, there's some people out there who've never gotten around to putting GPS in their aircraft.
Other than training?
And there are people who fly the airways from time to time.
Yeah, pretty cool.
With their own-
I fly
People practice
for
flying far.
backing up for GPS, so I have that.
But anyway, you will see power planes out here. Usually you'll be looking down on them, hopefully. The piston planes are down around the 6,000 feet.
5,000, yeah, 5,000.
Something like that, more common than they are. But they are out there. And that's, you know, that's useful for people to call on the radio when they see those around. So, let's see, yeah, I did write up some stuff about the convergence here.
Where is, so convergence generally just runs straight down the.
If you had to say, yeah, the most common location would be the top of the river. Some days it's pushed to the northeast, some days it's pushed to the west.
And usually you can see that on the
And the blip maps help a lot with that. I think the, you know, the RASP blip map has the best convergence predictor in it. But even then, of course, you always fly the day you find, not the forecast. People, you know, will give you some reports on the radio. So I have seen days when marked by clouds, or even not marked by clouds, because this was way out here. And that's where we flew.
To the east, you mean?
To the east. It's more rare to see it to the west of the range. As I said, you know, I usually fly this with Pinoche glide, and then Hernandez airstrips and glide, and then Newco leaning glide. So I'm flying, quote, airport to airport. When I'm flying, that just means I've always got an airport in glide. Occasionally I've had beginners say, I flew to that airport and there was no lift and I landed there. And that will happen if you fly out to Newco later. You know, you go to Avenal and you'll get to scratch up like the Avenal people did, because they got off at 2,000 feet and spent 2 hours getting the sunset flat out. So it's fly the ridgeline. Now then, so let's say you've made it down to Black Mountain, and you're going to turn around and come back. And what's interesting, you'll see on Rami's trace here, is especially on this region between elevator 4 in Black Mountain, he followed almost the same line both ways. It's more commonly, it's sort of like lookout, over Center Peak, up like this, things like that. So you're coming back, and it's about, what, 50 nautical miles from Elevator 4 to Hollister. And, you know, a good day, you get to 10,000 feet at Elevator 4, and in a 40-to-1 glider, as long as you don't hit bad sink, that's enough to glide home. And so, on the way back, my recommendation is get as high as you can around here, because this is probably the best lift you're going to find on the way back.
That's the
Around the Elevator 4, around this area, you know, whatever's working best around here. Sometimes it's tough to understand the
And on many occasions, the last lift that you will find.
Some days that's the last lift you're going to find. And
Yeah, and unlike flying in the Sierras, when you're 14,000 feet out there, you're gonna be landing at sea level. That's a kind of glide longer than you'll almost experience anywhere.
yeah, when you think of it, you know,
It's 60 miles of just cruising.
yeah, you know,
Amazing view.
when you think that, you know, the airports in the Sierras are at 4,000 feet at Air Sailing and Minden. And so a 14,000 foot day in the Sierras, you think, hey, I can go all over the place. You're 10,000 feet above your landing area. So 10,000 feet here, where Hollister's at 200 feet, Pinocha's at 1,300 feet. You know, 10,000 feet gives you a big radius.
So what's a conservative altitude then before you commit to gliding back to all?
Well, you know, it depends on the glider,
Glider.
but like I said,
And depends on the sea
Benito's, if
breeze.
you're
Yeah.
12, you've got it made.
yeah,
You don't need anything else.
I go as high as I can.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go as high as I can get back there. I'm not gonna stop at 10 if I'm still climbing at 3 knots. It's a blue day. I'll go to cloud base, or I'll go, you know, when it's down to a knot and a half, I'm gonna get up and keep going. If I've got to 12, and it's a blue day, and I wanna get home, I might just leave a good thermal and keep going. But then, you know, as you continue on, I would say you continue on the route towards Elevator 2, and, you know, the last time I flew this route, I think I got to 9,000 here, and then I hit some sink, and then I was down to 7, and then I climbed back up to 8 at Elevator 2, and that was the last usable lift.
Where
So-
does the headwind typically kick in? Is that around Pinocha,
No,
or is that
no.
farther?
Down around 2,000 feet.
Yeah.
Is it?
So-
It's a real thin layer.
Yeah, the really strong sea breeze is about 2,000 feet or below. What you'll often find is, so you come north, and you do not go to the Pinocha Valley, you do not go to Elevator 1, unless there's a cloud streak going there,
You just fly straight to Chemise and
just
just turn
straight to
right.
Chemise,
Right.
and you don't turn right at Chemise, because if you flew straight from Elevator 2 to Chemise, you're pointed straight at Hollister.
Oh, are you? Oh, okay.
Yeah, you're pointed straight at Hollister. So here's Elevator 2, here's Chemise, you just keep going straight, there's Bickle, there's
Oh,
Hollister.
okay.
You just keep
Okay.
going
So you
straight.
don't head over to the East Range then?
No.
You just head straight for the
If
airport?
there's a nice cloud streak over there,
Yeah.
I'll go there to extend my flight.
But the sea breeze will typically,
Blow that up?
would basically, yeah, it'll basically wash it out.
Yeah, there's some days when you can still hit lift on the way back over on this side, some days it's marked like
The
clouds.
Hollister on the nose and.
It all depends. But, yeah,
Romney found left, you can see, right?
yeah, Robbie, you can see when Rob, this is the trace coming back, he climbed at Chemise from,
Well, how high was it, you know?
well, he was at 6 and he climbed to 7.3. And then he caught a few more bumps and he got, you know, here he got back up to 5,500. He just used the altitude to go play around.
So, but as Harry said, if you max out on the last climb there in San Benito.
And you just need to drive.
You often have plenty of altitude, so when I'm doing that, I'm also still going to the east and following the ridge because I have altitude to spare.
Yeah, I mean,
And you
Why waste
continue
it?
north until you've burned it off. And,
Sure.
yeah, you get a little past, you get halfway between Chemise and Pickle, and if you're at 6,500 feet, you say, I got 1,000 feet, 1,500 feet to burn off, whatever, I can play with it, I'll go out here to the East Ridge and play on the way
Right.
home. But assuming you're going straight back, you know, if you've got sort of minimum altitude, what you'll find is you leave here and the air just becomes still. You're just typically flying in dead air. And you may even up to this point have a tailwind at higher altitudes. You might have a 5-knot tailwind up there at 7,000 feet. And that slowly goes away and you start getting a little bit of headwind as you get down past Bickle. And you might be at 4,000 feet or something passing Bickle and then, you know, get you back to Hollister about 2,000 or something like that. That's a typical, I think the lowest I've gotten back to Hollister is 1,300 feet or something.
And you're saying that the fog is usually within a couple miles of Hollister when the
Well-
fog does come in?
What I've seen it fairly rare that I've ever encountered the fog coming back.
Yeah, right.
The times I have encountered it, the closest was it was a mile or two west of here, Stratus later. I suppose there have been other days when it's been actually over the airport, and people had to duck under the Stratus later to come in.
Yeah.
But that's pretty rare.
It's pretty rare, right? It's later in the day that it finally makes its way all the way over, like 7:30, 8 o'clock in the middle of summertime or something, or at this time of year, it'll be, like 7-ish or something, just as the sun starts to set, and finally he's able to
Yeah.
creep his way all the way in. And he's still go underneath it.
That's the thing that probably scares me.
In the summertime or late spring, it's even common to just standing on the ground at Hollister, looking towards Mount Hamilton and looking down towards the Pinoche Valley. It's sometimes very dramatic. It's just this blue gap, and then there's clouds, cumulus clouds over the Henry Cove State Park, and then there's cumulus clouds that are down over
And there's
like
Pinoche.
EL1 and Pinoche, and it's just been washed out.
Yeah,
The sea breeze has just come
air
in.
blows it.
Occasionally there'll be like a horseshoe shape of clouds that have been pushed way back, but most of the time it's just like somebody take a big blower and the sea breeze.
Well, there are a bunch of, electrical generating windmills right up here at Pacheco Pass for that reason, they're harvesting that wind. There are days when you come back in here and there's a low-level convergence line that only goes up to 2,500 feet or something in a radius right around here. And you get back and you don't feel like landing it and you sort of float around in that for a while. But let's say you got back to Hollister, it's time to land. Almost always, the sea breeze is blowing down runway 24. You're gonna land on 24. All the other traffic is taking off on 24. There's left traffic to all of this.
Yeah.
It fools a lot of people on the sectional chart. There is an R with an asterisk next to Hollister, RP asterisk. And what they don't understand is the RP with asterisk says, look it up in the airport facility directory. When you look it up in the airport facility directory, it says right pattern for helicopters. And it's so dumb that it does that in Hollister. And apparently they were trying to change that, but apparently the right pattern for helicopters is in the city code of Hollister.
Well, I'll give you an update on that. Well, does it really matter?
We can have an update on that now.
Okay, it's in the process of going away, so it should go away
Okay,
soon.
good. Hopefully it'll go away soon and won't be confused by it. So you'll get transient pilots, they see that and they want to fly right patterns, and we always have to tell
City
them.
code's been changed.
Left pattern at Hollister.
So one question I have, so I fly a lot up in the, Truckee
Yeah.
area. You're always used to great lift, but also horrendous sink. Are there any big sink generators on the way back? You sound like it's 2 miles.
It's usually pretty mild as long as you obey the convergence. In terms of the area south of Chenise, obey the convergence. If you wander off it, you could get washed out. That's why I say don't go to Pinoche, because most of the time you'll get washed out and be landing at Pinoche if you go that direction.
How bad is the sink when you're off the convergence?
Depends on the day.
So how wide do you go for a flight? If you go up 100 feet?
Some days, yeah, you'll notice it when you go just a few hundred feet one side or the other.
Each wingtip
Sometimes
is
it's a
in
big
sync,
zone
but
and
the center's
sometimes So anyway, you floated back to Hollister, hopefully you've got, 1,500 feet AGL or something, so you've got a little bit of time to look around. So, if I need to, if I'm really low, I would just come, I'm gonna do a long base leg and land on 2-4. That's your lowest alternative. If I'm high enough, I'll come in and float around up here, so I get a look at what's going on, and then in like a midfield crosswind, and then a downwind, and come here. The power traffic is coming in on a 45 typically, and it gives me a chance to see what's going on. The other traffic that you're going to encounter, other gliders, there's a parachute jump plane coming and going. It's one of these turboprop pack things that's specifically designed to take a dozen brightly colored humans up to 13,000 feet, throw them out the door, and come back.
45-degree angle on
Yeah, and
the
so they
approach and the
They
and the
climb like
departure.
this, and they turn base at about 4,000 feet. And put the prop to flat pitch and come back. They're used to